Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to another episode of Reinvented, Redefining the Impact of Life Storms. I'm your host, Carla Denise, and today I have with me a very special guest, none other than Jane Keifer of the Artemis Center. She's the executive director and works as an advocate to end domestic violence in our community. So please join me in welcoming Jane to our show.
Thank you.
Welcome,
so much.
Jane. I'm so excited that you came to join me today.
I am thrilled to be here.
Yes, very worthy topic of speaking about, is it not?
It is. We really don't talk about it enough, and we know that it's happening in so many of our household communities.
Absolutely. You know, the more that I begin to talk about this show, as I shared with you earlier, I found people coming out and saying, you know, it's happened to me. You know, it's really going on. So I think that part of it is because we don't talk about the different types of domestic violence, as well as how much it is going on. So share with us professionally, what are the different types of domestic violence one can experience?
Sure. So I think everyone goes to the physical. Everyone thinks, oh, the black eye, the broken arm. But we know that there's the emotional abuse where our abusers call us names, put us down, makes it really hard. Financial abuse can keep money from us, put us on a budget. There's using our kids against us, and there's sexual violence. We know domestic violence is about power and control. We know sexual violence can be that power and control. There's spiritual violence, not allowing us to practice our faith the way we wanted to. And I think I hit all of them. If not, I'll remember it in a second.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that I actually haven't heard of spiritual violence before, or spiritual abuse. So what's that about?
So maybe like when we're dating and we agree we're going to raise our kids in this faith, and then all of a sudden my abuser's like, no, we're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. Or maybe my abuser uses spiritual quotes against me to keep me in my place, or how I'm supposed to live my life. Or maybe my abuser now makes fun of me. Maybe I found a religion that I now want to practice, and now they're belittling me for that. So those are some of the examples when it comes to religious abuse.
Gotcha. So what is the first step that a person takes when they want to they want to take a look and see, am I actually in a domestic violence situation? Because I'm not being beaten up. I don't have the physical things. What do they do?
Right. Well, I think they question it, right? Because I think our communities always tell us, right, it's the black eyes and the broken bones and stuff. And so, but it doesn't feel good. And I think it's important to start by saying most people don't want to end their relationships right away. They want their abusers to stop being abusive, because we love this person. We made vows with this person. We may have children with this person. So it's not like, oh, immediately I want out. For some, maybe, but it really is a process. And so I think it really is just looking at, how does this feel? What does this mean? And if it doesn't feel good, questioning. And so I would say, I would hope that you would call our hotline and talk to an advocate, because people do call us and say, I'm not really sure this is violence because it's not, again, the physical. Right. And then we just talk about, well, let's talk about the totality of domestic violence.
I know in my particular situation, I had physical abuse like on 3 different occasions. Okay. But I was with him for 5 years. Mainly it was mental, emotional, and verbal every single day. And a lot of people will talk about how if it's not physical, then it may not stay with you, but actually the mental and the emotional is way worse than, I won't say way worse, because I want to make sure that I honor the physical violence too, because that actually adds mental and emotional too when somebody is tormenting you like that or terrifying you like that. But in my particular case, it was just so shredding for me mentally. I even was diagnosed with PTSD because of it and didn't even know. But every day I had to fear his abuse and live with his threats. So talk to us about the mental and the emotional part that comes along with domestic violence.
Carla, you just did an amazing job. So what I will add is, I think you're right. When in answering the hotline, people will say, we hear it all the time from survivors, the physical abuse heals, but the emotional is what's really hard, and it's also stuck in our head. And so what's happening in that emotional abuse is our abusers are saying really horrible things to us, right? Like, you're not gonna be able to make it without me, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're ugly, all those things. And we begin to learn or believe what we're hearing, so it's hard to unlearn that. And so we do think that emotional abuse is very detrimental to people's health. And so it's just important to recognize that too, it doesn't need to be the physical, but that the emotional is just as damning. And now I forgot what your question was because you answered it so beautifully. So
that is okay. That is perfectly okay. Just how to recognize the mental and the emotional. You know, a lot of times we think when we're in a relationship, oh, we're going to argue. He's going to say things to hurt my feelings. I'm going to say things to hurt his feelings. A lot of times, some of these survivors will even say that they were told, well, you brought it on. You know, you did it. But how do we tell what's the difference between just a healthy dispute and then something that is actually abuse?
Right. So I think it's important when we talk about domestic violence, we talk about it in the concept of power and control. So who has power and control in this relationship? I'm going to use financial abuse for an example. Maybe in your relationship, your husband balances the checkbook, but that's something you two agreed upon. So it's not abuse because they're writing all the checks. It becomes abusive when, okay, they're writing the checks, but now they're not going to let you look at the checkbook or let you look at the bank statements, right? And so now you're being left out. So it's about equality and being able to, so you can argue, everyone argues, but it's how it escalates and how it ends. So abusers really are known for not taking accountability and not being responsible. So they're going to always put the fault on our laps and saying it's all about us. When in healthier relationships, people can look at, oh, this is the part I played and this is the part you played, and have more healthy conversations. But when it's an abusive relationship, there's no healthy conversation and it's always blaming the other person.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that. There were places that I could not even go in my own house because he was controlling the environment. He controlled where the kids went. So why do they have such a need to control? Is it about their own insecurity? Do we know anything about why they abuse?
Yeah, that's, I love that you asked that question because we always ask, why does she stay, right? And so asking, why do they do this? I appreciate the conversation. So one, we have to make sure that we believe in the domestic violence world that it's a learned behavior, that folks learned this violent behavior over time. And so it's really important to stop generational violence. But it's also this thought process that they believe that they're entitled, so it's an entitlement issue, that they're entitled to treat you this way. If I can interject real quick, what we've learned, and you tell me, Carla, if you've experienced this, but most times the violence doesn't really show in a relationship until either you marry the person, you move in with the person, or you have a child with them. So that ownership piece all of a sudden kind of switches the dial and they think, oh, now you belong to me. Does that make sense?
Oh, it made perfect sense because that's exactly what happened. It was like 2 weeks after we got married.
Wow.
You know, and that's when the first time he had put his hands physically on me, and I began to see this other side of this person that I had not really seen. And then of course people say, well, there had to be red flags and there had to be something that you would have picked up on. But you're not really thinking about that. You're not saying, I'm going into this relationship to be abused. You know, I'm not, yeah, will you marry me? I'm gonna hit you. I'm gonna be nasty to you. I'm gonna scare you and traumatize you. You know, will you marry me? So we're not really thinking along those lines. But there are some things that do show when we're dating someone that we can kind of stop and pause and say, this might not be a healthy relationship for me to move forward. What are some of those things?
Some of what we call red flags in a relationship is that they're really jealous. They're really, they're accusing you of, let's say you make eye contact with the grocer, right? And now all of a sudden you want to have a relationship with this person.
Right.
They're oversensitive in terms of, I can make a joke with you, and if you turn that around, they blow up. Like you can't be funny back to them. Quick involvement. I met you, and like, let's get together right now. Let's start a family. So those are some big red flags. And in today's world, look on the website. Do they have a past history of domestic violence? A lot of times, if they do, they're going to say to you, my ex, she was just crazy. It was all about her. You know, they take, again, no responsibility. So looking for past behavior. We always say the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So look at their criminal record.
Yeah, wow. That's, well, a lot of people don't do that because they think that that's invading the privacy.
Yes.
And I've even heard men say, well, if you do that, I would not date you anyway. It's like, well, what do you have to hide, you know? but they see it as an invasion of their privacy. But we really need to take those type of avenues to protect ourselves, right?
Absolutely. And can I ask you a question?
Sure, absolutely.
So we were talking about the first time that he was physical with you. What was his reaction after that? Was he apologetic over? No.
Not at all. Not at all. He blamed, every time he was abusive, he blamed me.
You.
Yeah. I mean, even to the last time when I was out of the house in the process of going through the divorce, his excuse, he came to my apartment. I didn't know he was stalking me, but he was actually stalking me. And even that time, he spread rumors in the community to protect his image. He always blamed me, always said it was something that I did that caused that.
I ask because a lot of times the first time there's a physical incident, what we've learned is that most batters are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm stressed, I drank too much, there's all these excuses. And then we love this person and we think, well, they have been stressed a little bit, and we forgive them or we allow it, right? And then what happens is the abuser just learned, oh, I got away with it the first time, right? And so that's what I hear that a lot too. But the blaming and making you the person to be responsible is classic, if I can say that phrase.
Yeah. And I think I was in pure shock. So he probably like, oh, okay, she's not going to call the police. She's not going to do anything, because I was shocked that he did that to me and he turned into this other person. And then, of course, if you have, your own issues with your own insecurity or need for validation or whatever, they play into those things. So they kind of use it as a hook to keep that control over you, and that's what he did.
Absolutely. And you probably didn't call the police on the first time, did you?
I did not.
Right. And so we know most survivors tell us it's not until after the fifth incident, fifth physical incident, is before they call the police. And then we call the police, and then what happens? Sometimes they're arrested, sometimes they're not. And so it tells us who's going to help us. Like, where do we go?
Exactly. Because that's your biggest fear. When you call the police, it's like, if you don't save me now, it's going to be worse for me later on.
Right.
I know. I remember one time when I had sent my sons away to stay with their grandmother over the weekend, and I was going to pick them up, and he just lost it. I forgot what he lost it over, but that was like the first time that he was just like really explosively violent to me. I mean, like, he threw me across the room, pulled me by my hair. He threw me across the room with such force, I knocked the rocker that we had on one side of the room to the other side of the room. And then he stood over me and kicked me and began to, punch me. I couldn't feel anything. I really feel like the angels were with me, because I think I just numbed out on the situation. I couldn't believe that he was doing that. But then he insisted on going with me to pick up the boys, because he didn't want me to tell my mom what had happened. And people would say, well, why didn't you say something to your mom? The fear, because like you said, it's a subtle mind control. It's a manipulation. It's all kinds of things that they do to grab hold at that point in time and to just really control you mentally, emotionally, to make sure that you understand that they are in control.
Yes. And
you, especially if you're not a violent person yourself that would want to fight back and stuff all the time, they know that.
Right.
So they say things to you to just keep that control. And I didn't say anything to my mom, even though I went through that. I remember sitting in the car with her, with him, while we were getting the boys from them, and he knew he had to go with me because what he had did was wrong.
Yeah. Well, there's also the shame and the embarrassment, and there's love. I mean, that's the other thing that we talk about. You still love this person, but this person that you love just did this horrific act, and so sometimes it's hard to separate who this person is, because they weren't abusive 24/7, right? There's parts that you loved about him and enjoyed being with, and then we tell ourselves, this is the man I fell in love with. This is who he can be, and then they again repeat this pattern, and so it's hard. We call it occasional indulgences, like they gave us this part of them that we love, and so that makes it hard to leave as well.
Yeah, when I was actually studying it some, because I think that's what helped me through. At that time, I was taking courses at the University of Maryland, University College. It was online. And for some reason, there was a course available for one of my electives, and it was on domestic violence. And I started to take that. And that's when I began to educate myself on his behavior and why it was happening. Because I was walking in that blame, and I was walking in that shame. And that was keeping me tied to that relationship and tied to not speaking. Really, this is probably the first time that I've publicly spoken about my abuse. and being able to survive it. And it happened almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
And during that entire time, I've been in shame. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it, as I share with you, is because I know that there are other women out there that are going through the same thing, and they're afraid to speak out because of the shame and the embarrassment. Our society just does not accept it, you know, that it happened, you know, and it's embarrassing. And a lot of times I did get those comments that we talked about earlier, why didn't you leave? Or didn't you see the red flags, or things like that? And so you kind of shrink and you second guess yourself. And I know there's somebody's probably doing that.
Well, first,
yeah,
thank you for, I mean, it's huge to talk about. So I'm moved. So thank you for sharing and let me be a part of that. I'm honored.
Absolutely.
And I think you're right that we also live in a society, right, where we're told to be in a relationship, where we're told to be the nurturing wife and that we're going to make this marriage work. We take our vows seriously. Like, there's lots of reasons, and it's easy for what I call Monday morning quarterback, right? Like, everyone can be like, why don't you? Why don't you? But you and I could talk for 7 hours today, but we're never going to capture all the nuances that happen in relationships, right? And things are different for different people, and there's different triggers. So for some batters, like, some survivors will tell us, like, you love this person, so you share some of your deep, dark secrets. Well, then that batter uses them against you, right? Like, maybe you experienced sexual abuse as a child, and so now they're throwing that in your face. Like, there's just so many different things that are damaging that makes it hard for me to go, oh, I do value myself, because we're constantly focused on the abuser because we're wondering what their next step's going to be, and we lose sight of who we are, and it just makes it more challenging. So it makes sense. And honestly, 5 years, hats off to you, because for some, it's a lifetime, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They never get out, and that's unfortunate. But you said something very key that I want to go back to. You do watch your abuser. That's how I survived. Watching him, knowing when I was going to trigger him. Notice how I said that? And so that's something I still need to work on. When he was going to be upset, because there's nothing that I should ever do to trigger you. But that's what he would call it, me making him upset, or him coming home taking out his frustrations from the day on me.
And they like to, when they physically assault us, and let's say we fight back, because sometimes we're going to fight back. And then they're going to look at us and go, "See, you're just as abusive. You're the one with the problem." And then they turn it around. And again, we are women who programmed to go, am I? Like, we pause and think about it. And that's why, if I can just do a quick shout out too, that we don't ever want people to go to marriage counseling when they're in a domestic violence situation. Like, that is not a safe place for you. Could you imagine saying, oh, he grabbed me and threw me across the room in this therapy session, and then you got home? What's going to happen to you, right? It's a safety concern. And it's, again, we're going to talk about equality. And when you're in a domestic violence relationship, there's no equality there. Like, the therapist is going to talk to you as equals, but they have the power and control. And so it's not helpful, because again, we internalize and we're like, oh, I do want to make my marriage work. How can we do this better? And then again, you're going to get home and they're going to be pissed that you shared the secret of what happens in the house.
We actually did try it, because I was foolish enough to, well, I won't say foolish. I wanted to stay.
Yes.
I wanted my marriage to work, not because I wanted to be with him, but because those other factors that I deemed valuable for me were driving me to want to make the marriage work and have a long-lasting marriage. So we went to counseling, and my counselor told me, she called me later on after we left, because he actually started insulting her in the middle of the session. She said, I have never said this to anyone before. She said, get away from him as fast as you can.
Good for her.
He's a dangerous man. Get away from him. And when she said that, it kind of like, oh gosh, I was so embarrassed because of the things he was saying towards her. I mean, he was talking about her physical appearance and just making comments to even her. And I'm like, wow, you are really bold to now do that here. But if you're bold enough to do that with someone who is in a professional capacity that could possibly even report you or something, I can only imagine what you're going to do to me one day.
You are that. We talk about, when we do what's called a lethality assessment, when we look at the relationship, we ask a bunch of questions. And one of the questions is, has there been violence outside of the home? Have other people witnessed? And if the answer is yes, we know that the violence is escalating, because usually most batters want to present in a very distinguished, upstanding citizen kind of way. They don't want anybody to see it. But so if they're getting to the point of they're chasing you out in the front yard and they're assaulting you in the front yard or yelling at whatever, then that just tells me as an advocate, oh, this they're not caring about who's witnessing the violence.
The last time that he physically assaulted me, when he came to the apartment and we were supposed to be done, I was filing for divorce and everything, he went around to all of my friends and even my employer and called, of course, to try to cover up now, saying that he had caught me in a situation and everything, and so he began to blame me for things and basically just cover up. He was trying to really just defend his behavior, you know, by, again, blaming me. Now, I knew at that point in time that this was the blame game he played all along. But what concerned me at that moment is the fact that he was so free to go around, that he would call people. He had no fear of the police, no concern for the police. I even had to call them and say, are you guys gonna arrest him? Because he's going to my mom, he's going to different places. So I knew at that point in time, it had to be a total separation for me, because he was beginning to be outwardly bold about what had happened and was trying to, he didn't fear, let's put it this way, he didn't fear the police or anybody like that.
And Carla, honestly, what we know is the most vulnerable time for survivors is when they leave. And we usually say within that 3-month time frame after leaving, because again, if we talk about power and control, the abuser wants to get that power and control back. You just took it for yourself. And so they're either going to beg and promise to change, or it could lead to homicide. If I can't have you, no one will. And I think what you talked about too is so important. We don't talk about that enough either, is what we call separation violence. Like, people say, why doesn't she leave? Okay, she left, but it doesn't mean the violence didn't stop, right? So the stalking behavior, the going around talking to people about you, like, it just doesn't stop. It doesn't necessarily end it. And so then I think it's important that it takes an average to 6 to 8 times to leave a relationship. So sometimes we think it's just easier to go back and calm him and make it better and work on it. And again, because we love this person, we want to make it work, but there's a leaving and a coming back process for many, because of all the different factors that you've been sharing so beautifully.
And I think I can speak to that, because that's what we do in it. We calm them. We pacify them. We try to de-escalate it based on what we need to do. And so when you're out and you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's like that fight or flight is always there when you're in that type of situation. So when you get out of it, you're still mentally there. And you're like, if I don't pacify him, if I don't soothe this situation, he may come for me. He may come for somebody I love, you know? So that's why I believe, speaking as a survivor, survivors go back. And then also too, because a lot of people think that we just don't want help, you know? So if we're afraid to reach out to an Artemis Center, and we've got friends and family that we really don't want to tell, because there for a while I didn't want to tell my friends and family, because I believe my friends, especially my dad, because my dad asked my mom, he's like, is something going on in that situation? Because Carla doesn't seem right. I lied. I lied to my own mom and dad about it, because I didn't want them to get hurt. So there's so many reasons why people stay. And if I could say anything to the viewers, whenever you are watching or witnessing a domestic violence situation, have a heart of compassion towards that victim, because that victim may be staying not because they want to stay or because they're weak, but because they are in survival mode and they're trying to protect themselves, their children, and other people that they actually love and care about, or they don't have a plan.
And it really is individualized, because everyone's situation is different. You may have kids, you may not have kids. You might have a pet, and you know, they might threaten the pet. So really, one of the first questions I always ask when we safety plan with somebody is, are you even comfortable calling 911? Because some people aren't. I mean, some people have had bad experiences with the police. So now we know that calling 911 is not the right thing. But basic safety plan, that when we don't go into great detail, so it doesn't, if a batter were to hear this and sabotage someone's safety plan, but think about things like, don't go in the kitchen where there's access to a knife, right? Or don't go in the bathroom because it's very closed space and you can't get out. So some of the thinking about that, And one thing also is like create a code word. So if you could have created a code word with your mom, whatever that word would have been, and you're on the phone with her and you said it, she knew to call the police, or she knew to come over, or she knew whatever that plan for you two would have been. And then he would not be able to blame you. You're always going to be blamed, but you weren't the reason that this happened, so to speak. So it really is this helping someone kind of think through all of that. And the other thing I think it's really important is you don't necessarily have to be in the space of I'm leaving to call us, right? You could just be in the space of this doesn't feel good, I'm scared, I'm not sure I can leave right now. Because again, we're talking about financial abuse, they're controlling all the money. But let's talk about some options for the time being, and then your safety plan can change over time, and we'll keep working on it and making sure that you're comfortable and you have the resources and options that you need.
Yeah. Now I want to shift too, because we're talking about women.
Yes.
But I also saw some stats where now 1 in 9 men are being abused as well. And I'm sure that there's probably some men that are going to be watching that are going to say, well, what about me?
Absolutely.
So what do we say to them?
So I say absolutely men can be abused. We know that. And I think there's different stigmas for men to come forward that makes it harder. Unfortunately, I'm old school, right? And so I've been doing this a long time, but we also know the stats are 85 to 95% of victims are women. So that's where we kind of land. But I think it's really important to say that Artemis Center serves men, and we do, and we go to court with individuals. Here's the truth, and people get frustrated. We really only serve the victim. And so sometimes batterers present as victims, but we have to do our due diligence to make sure that we're serving victims, because if we end up serving a batter, we just alienated the victim. So I just want people like, oh, you know, I'm a guy, you're not going to serve me. No, if you're a victim, we're going to serve you. So we really just focus on serving survivors. But absolutely, men can call and go to support group, go to court with us. Like, we will serve them.
Gotcha. So what's the court process look like? Once I get out, what now?
Yeah. Well, it's a couple things. So if you want to call the criminal court, you can go get a protection order, and there's usually a pretrial and a trial. Usually gets pled out. Your protection order only lasts as long as there's a court process. There's also the civil court process. So you could have been entitled to a protection order if you wanted that. But I also heard you say he didn't really care, so I don't think he would have honored a protection order.
Right.
But a protection order is where you go into the court and explain why you want a protection order. And Artemis helps. We're not attorneys, can't practice law, but we can help you walk through that process, and that's called the ex parte. And then there's a full hearing, and after the ex parte, the abuser gets served with paperwork, and then you show up. You may or may not have an attorney, depends. If there's property and children and all that, you're going to want an attorney. If not, the two of you just go in front of the judge and say why you want this order of protection, and then they take that under advisement, and they either grant it or not grant it, and that can last up to 5 years. So that gives a little bit of breathing space for some.
Gotcha. Now I've heard for years, and it was one of the reasons why I didn't do it either. It's just a piece of paper. What's going to stop? That's not going to stop him. So how does it really help? What can it really help and do?
It really, you're right, it's a piece of paper. It's not going to stop a bullet. I hear it all the time too. But it is a tool to help the police. It really is a piece to be able to hold them accountable. It can be frustrating. I don't want to say this is the magic bullet either, in terms of, you know, they're supposed to stay so many feet from you, but they'll be driving down the street in front of your house, and you know they're going to be like, well, it's a public street. So there's still things that happen, but it allows the police to, if you get the civil order protection and it's violated, then they can be charged criminally with the violation of the order. So it's just another tool to help the police.
Okay, gotcha. And then once they actually are in the proceedings, do I have to appear? Can somebody appear for me? I don't really want to see him again.
Right, amen.
What do we do?
right.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you have to go.
Yeah.
You have to, and that's the thing we talk about, even when you get a protection order, the courtrooms are small, but you know, we try to prepare folks to what they're walking into, but you do have to be present, because there's, they have the right to see their accuser, and, but there's ways that the court works to make sure that you're separated and that they don't talk to you, they can't intimidate you, they're not allowed to have any kind of contact with you.
Gotcha. So if I'm a batterer and I'm watching this, or I see something else and I'm like, wow, I shouldn't be doing that, is there help for me anywhere?
That's such a great question that I have been asking the community recently. So there is one batter intervention program currently in our community, which isn't enough. Now, I should say, if you are charged through the Dayton Municipal Court, there's a program, it's called the Batter Stop the Violence Program.
Okay.
So there is programming. I would say Dayton lacks good resources.
Okay.
However, but if there's somebody who's watching and you're like, I want to change and be different, then it's called the August Project through the Family Services Association, and they provide a batter intervention program.
Okay. And so final thoughts on domestic violence and the resources offered.
Well, I'd be remiss if I did not say, please call our hotline, which is a 24-hour hotline. And it's 461-HELP, 937-461-HELP. And I think the message I always want to share is you don't have to be necessarily the victim. You could be a family member of someone you love that you're watching go through this, because it's hard to watch that. We encourage you to call us. And I think that people like you who have the courage to share is what we need, because we can't keep it behind closed doors, because then it's easy to hide it. And so as long as we keep talking about it and making sure that people know that they're not alone and it's not their fault, that's what's going to be so helpful.
Right. That's perfect. All right. Well, Jane, thank you so much for joining me today. You know that this is a topic that's dear to my heart. I pray that it helped someone out here. And if you have any questions at all, check out their website, go to their hotline, and say their hotline number again.
937-461-4357.
And seek the assistance you need. These are trained professionals. They know every single thing the batterer may be doing, and they have resources to help you and guide you through that situation. I'm here to tell you that there is life after domestic violence, and I just pray for your safety the entire time that you're there. Know that there is a future for you, and start to reach out for the help and resources that are available. Thank you so much for watching, and as we always say on Reinvented, have a great day on purpose.